Folks, welcome to Inside the Leader's Mind, where what's in the way becomes the way. I'm your host, David Susan, and I'm so excited to have my guest here today, Chris Heye. Chris Heye, PhD. He is the CEO and founder of Whealthcare Solutions Incorporated and Whealthcare Planning LLC. Dr. Heye is a technology entrepreneur who writes, researches, and speaks on subjects that reside at the intersection of health, personal finance, and longevity, which is part of the reason I wanted him on the show because I just thought that was fascinating. He's designed and developed multiple software products, including generative AI-powered coaching agents that facilitate more productive client and family conversations and empower more informed decision-making. Chris, welcome to the show.
David, thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Oh, as am I. When I learned about what you do, I was fascinated. But what I'd love you to do is explain it to our guests, our listeners, the way you explained it to me, meaning what is Whealthcare Solutions or Whealthcare Planning? Like what does it do? What do you do? What does the business do?
Yeah, well, as I've gotten older, I've and been through certain family situations. I've really come to the realization that the greatest threat to the financial security of adults, especially older adults, for many of them is not a stock market crash or a recession or taxes or inflation. It's their health. And I've seen that in many different ways. I've seen people get scammed for literally millions of dollars
Mm.
because of some form of diminished capacity. I've seen people have to pay 10, 20, $30,000 a month to take care of an aging parent. I've been through it with my mother had dementia, her mother had dementia,
Mm.
and it just gets very expensive, and it can affect both the money you spend and the money that comes in. Unlike, some other things like taxes, that affects your spending a little bit, but it doesn't really affect your income so much. But if you're still of working age and you have a heart attack, if you have cancer, then boom, your income goes away, and then you have all these new expenses. So there are a lot of different forms that these costs can take. But again, for many adults, it's really their biggest financial risk. So that's kind of what brought me into this. And again, I have a lot of family and personal experience with health-related events and costs just having, in some cases, virtually catastrophic consequences for friends of mine. So I just feel like not enough is being done to protect older adults and families. So that's what's really got me into this.
So help me and our listeners understand the difference between what you're doing and what just a traditional financial planning person does. Because people
Yeah,
listening to the description might hear, oh, that's just financial planning. You're a financial planner. And that's not what you're doing, if I understand
no,
right.
I think, I mean, there are certainly some financial planners who take these health events and costs into account, but most of the industry is still kind of focused on portfolio management or maybe a little, tax management. And unfortunately, a lot of financial professionals are not comfortable talking about health related events and costs. So one of the families that I know that lost, all their savings within about 6 months or a year after the father started having, serious cognitive issues, he had a financial advisor. And I don't know the specifics of that case, but I know a lot of, I hear this and I see this. A lot of financial professionals aren't comfortable talking about health. They're not comfortable talking about, cognitive decline. They're not comfortable talking about, death. And so I think a lot of these conversations that need to be had don't happen. And as a consequence, it never even enters the plan, and these risks are never even really factored in. And then all of a sudden, the money can be gone. I mean, like a financial scam or basically cognitive decline in general can ruin the greatest portfolio you've ever put together. Can just be completely torpedoed by cognitive decline. And so, yeah, so I come at this a little bit differently. And again, there are some financial advisors who are doing this type of planning, but the vast majority aren't. And I think it's really important because and it's also kind of a case of doing well by doing good. I think, if you look at these surveys, these health events and costs, they're front of mind for clients, for older adults. If you ask most older adult, what do you think the biggest threat is? If you look at these surveys, the answer is rarely taxes or inflation. It's almost always health events and costs, long-term care costs, those kinds of things. So clients and consumers are looking for this help, but frequently not getting it.
And what is your differentiator or distinction that makes what you do different? How would you describe that?
There's a few things. I mean, I don't even really get into the quantitative planning. I have my tools. They don't ask how much, people have or, what they're invested in. I leave that to the financial professionals. But there's a lot of sort of non-quantitative planning that needs to go into all this. So that's part of it. So I have people thinking more about, some of the legal aspects, the healthcare aspects, and how these all kind of fit together. I mean, I believe that, for most older adults, you can't really separate health and wealth. They're kind of the same. As you get older, they become kind of the same thing. So that's one thing that's different. The other thing, I've been fortunate. Not only have I worked with some great financial planners, but I've worked with some great psychiatrists in the Boston area. The head of geriatric psychiatry at Mass General Hospital, Dr. Tony Weiner. I've worked with Dr. Ned Hollowell, who's a New York Times bestselling author. So I try to bring in this whole sort of psychological, really kind of emotional, behavioral piece because, the way people make financial decisions is not how I was taught in microeconomics in college. Most people aren't rational actors making decisions based on the best available information. They're making decisions based on gut feelings. They're making decisions based on personal histories. They're making decisions based on, peer influence. So I think that's something else that I bring to the table. There's a recognition that, money isn't always money. Financial decisions aren't always just about finances. So you really need to take into account these emotional considerations in order to really understand why people are making decisions and then help them make better decisions.
I love that. And when did this, I know you talked about, people that had lost a lot of money, but
Yeah.
from a business standpoint, when did this stop becoming just an idea and really become your mission? Like that you
It's probably
said,
about,
okay, I'm going to leave, whatever
yeah,
comfort I had in this other career or whatever I
yeah.
was doing, and now I'm going to put it all on the line to do this business, run it, create a business, etc.
It was about 10 years ago. I was working with a company that I helped start, 10 years prior to that, and it's still going strong, doing really well. Um, and the previous company called Steep Rock, we were working, and they still work in the in the pharmaceutical business. So I was getting some, education in about, certain drugs, certain products, diseases, somewhat indirectly. And then, there was kind of this cascade events about 10 years ago. My mother's really started showing signs of dementia. We had a feeling that something was going to happen because her mother had dementia and her sister was starting to show signs. So, and she went into a memory unit about 8 years ago. Um,
Mm.
and then also I have a friend who, I have these two friends who I was getting to know. Well, one I know pretty well, another one I was getting to know, around the same time reported how their parents had been scammed. And, I started talking to my friend who was, the head of geriatric psychiatry. And I said, do you see this in your practice? Do you see people making bad financial decisions? He's like, are you kidding me? All the time. Um, and he's constantly on the lookout for signs that people are making poor, not just life decisions, but financial decisions. And then we got together, and he was friends with Andrew Lowe at he's a brilliant MIT professor, and we kind of got together and decided to do this little study at Mass General Hospital. And then based on that study, I developed a little cognitive assessment, sort of a cognitive behavioral assessment that's focused on financial decision making. And then it just kind of went from there. building some other tools, developing education materials, connecting with other experts in financial planning. And it just seemed like it was time and I was ready to do something else. So it was kind of a confluence of all those factors.
And then all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but then you say, okay, I'm going to make this a go as a business.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was 10 years ago or when?
Yeah. About 10 years ago. Yeah. Eight,
Okay.
10 years ago. Yeah. 10 years ago.
What's over the last 10 years, what's been the hardest part for you personally?
Um, when you start a company, especially when you start in an area that's new and that's new to people and you have new ideas, and you have to do a little evangelizing. That's hard. Um, and you get people interested, but it's hard to sort of bring them over the finish line. Um, you learn to you learn to take your lumps. Um, but I guess I feel like there's some. I feel like this is still the right thing. I may be a little bit early. There may be some reluctance, but in the long term, this is where we're going to end up. And so I've got a little bit of stubbornness in me, and so I'm convinced that what I'm doing is a good thing and can be helpful to others. So I'm not going to stop until I can't work anymore.
I love that. What's the hardest part and you kind of alluded to it already, but what do you think is the hardest part right now? Because it's easy, once you got 100 employees, you
Right.
get to the point, or revenue, you hit a certain revenue number, it's almost on autopilot, right? You've got all
Yeah.
the kinks, you got the process. But for you at the stage you're in right now, what's the hardest part?
Well, I think, I have most of my clients are smaller companies, small IRAs. And so, of course, you're always trying to get to the bigger companies. And I've talked to some BDs and large RIAs. But as somebody once said, it's a great quote. He said something to the effect that, these large companies always want to come in second. They don't want to be the first ones to try anything. So, if I want to work with a large BD, they're going to ask me what other large BDs I'm working with, broker dealers. So it's almost like a chicken or an egg, problem where you want to get over this hump to establish some form of credibility. Um, but it's hard because people want to see the credibility before they'll let you in the door. So and again, I'm doing something that's it's different. I've always kind of rebelled again. I've always said, well, somebody else is already doing that, so I'm not going to do that. But that's my approach. But I see plenty of products that look just like other products that succeed.
Right.
So part of me even wouldn't mind if I had competitors because they would be almost doing some marketing for me. They'd be opening the doors. So, but for me, it's still, I'm not quite alone on an island, but there are not a lot of people on this island yet.
Yeah. So the idea is how do we make the pie bigger, right?
Yeah.
So that becomes more buy-in. And I know we spoke offline a little bit about financial advisors, and there and I don't want to generalize. And so if I misquoted or misheard you, let me
Hmm.
know. But recall you saying something about financial advisors sometimes um, don't always want to talk about or address cognitive decline. Did I understand that right or not?
Yeah. Again, I don't want to single out just
Right.
financial
I don't want to
professionals
throw them under
because
the bus. Yeah.
I don't, and I don't for a number of reasons. One is a lot of people don't a lot of people don't like talking about cognitive decline, not just financial professionals. Um, so I think there's been, historically a major stigma about mental illnesses in this country and most countries. Um, so I think there's a general reluctance for most of us not to want to talk about it. But I do think that that's changing. So there's two important things. One is I think that attitude's changing. You see a much greater acceptance of mental illness. I mean, I don't think mental illness is an illness. Okay, people if it, people don't think you're weird if you have a heart attack or if you have cancer, but if you have mental illness, like, oh, can't talk about that, or
Sure.
something's wrong with that person. So I try to look at it as an illness. It's just another illness. It's not a moral failure. Um, and so, but the reason why it's so important for financial professionals to have these discussions is that many studies have shown this now. One of the first signs of cognitive decline is poor financial decision making. And in the study that we did at Mass General Hospital, we saw some indications of this. But there's studies that show that people make errors on credit card applications and other financial decisions 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years before an official diagnosis of dementia. So one thing that we found in the study, that there's definitely a correlation between sort of good organizational skills, good executive function, and good financial decision making. And when that executive function starts to go away, when you start to lose the capacity to plan, to organize, to connect the dots, that's all the things around executive function, then the decision making really declines. So advisors may see these small, subtle changes before even a doctor, before even, so in many ways, for better or worse, these financial professionals are on the front line of identifying and managing cognitive decline. So that's why they're in a slightly different position than, say, maybe, an attorney or, some business colleague, some other professional, but because they're likely to see it first. So they need to be made more aware of the signs and how to identify it, how to manage it, and how to mitigate it.
So I don't want to assume, because in my mind, I'm thinking 85-year-old people. What what are you seeing? Yeah, you're shaking your
It's
head because I mean,
unfortunately, it's
that's my
way
world.
earlier. It's
Like,
way earlier.
how early are we talking? What's been the
Well,
experience with you and the people that
the
advise you?
research, there's been one major research study found that the peak age of financial decision making is 53, not 63, not 73, not 83, 53. Another study I saw something about decline start around the late 40s. Um, so the
Wait. So hang on, let me back up. Decline, the peak 53 is the peak.
peak age of financial peak age of financial decision making. So there's been studies that look at, like, again, errors on credit cards. There's different ways that there's been able to find some large data sets where they've been identify mistakes in financial decisions around finances, and then they correlate that with age. And what they found is that for the average person, after they reach age 53, they start to get worse at making sound financial decisions.
Got it. Because the way I heard it was they start making a lot of financial plans at 53. You're saying
No,
the decline, the
their
mistakes are happening.
capacity for most of it, their capacity
Wow.
starts to decline. Now, again, everybody's different, and we all know different people. I mean, I've known, people in their 80s who are, and
Right.
sure you have too, who are driving, who are just incredibly lucid, and other people in their early
90s.
70s,
Yeah. Yeah.
90s, sure. Um,
Yeah.
and then other people in their 70s who you wouldn't want to get in the car with them. You wouldn't want them
Well, I know
making
people in
plans.
their
And then,
40s.
again,
I don't want to get in the car.
yeah, but and again, it's not to say these are bad people or they're whatever. It is what it is. It's just like, some people are going to men are going to get prostate. My dad got prostate cancer when he was 60 and he was dead when he was 70. Um, you know, most men are going to get prostate cancer, but some will get it in their 50s and some won't get them to their 90s, and they'll be in the 90s and the doctor will say, we don't care. So it's similar with cognitive decline. It can really vary dramatically, depending on the person. So yeah, so basically the other thing, and for me, that peak age of 53 it's almost worse than that, because a lot of these decisions are made again, there's this behavioral, this emotional component to a lot of financial decisions. And one of the psychiatrists that I know told me about a client, very bright woman. She was in her 50s, I think. I think he said in the 50s, but she was divorced, she was lonely, got to know somebody online and, lost tens of thousands of dollars. And this woman would have aced a cognitive test. Sort of cognitively, she was fine. Um, but emotionally, behaviorally, she was not. So I think that, when you look at the statistics, and I do this all the time, you look at the statistics about dementia or mild cognitive impairment, um, they really almost understate the dangers of poor financial decision making because you really need to bring in this additional, more behavioral component into the equation, I think, because some of the, in one case of the scam I saw, that again, the person was cognitively in pretty good shape, but he was seeing younger women and lonely. And so, and more studies have suggested that anxiety, depression, loneliness all have, negative consequences for financial decision making. I mean, not surprisingly, but they're there and they're important.
So, so does the tool that you've developed, the solution you've developed, help people identify this at an earlier age?
Yeah. So
Is
one
that the
thing,
goal?
and that's part of it. So there's that part identification. I always like to say identification, mitigation, and management. And
Okay.
so what you want to do is you want to help identify, but you also want to be able to manage and be prepared. Because basically what I say is like health events in general are inevitable. We're all going to have a health event. So I try to focus on the preparation side. So saying you may not have dementia now, but you might in 5 or 10 years. So let's start putting the building blocks in place when it does happen. So that's a big part of it. And I have this behavioral assessment that was based on the clinical study that I helped design at Mass General Hospital. So that's one of the tools. There's just sort of a straight financial literacy tool. And there's just a lot of recommendations about how to identify, how to talk about it. This is the other important thing, how to talk about, like, imagine, these discussions go on a lot between children and parents. And we know, everybody knows stories where the parent is usually the father, is thinks that they're still making great decisions. They're 75 years old. They say, I've been doing this my whole life. But then when you look at the bank account, there's tens, 20s, $30,000 leaving every, week or month. And so there's, the father's, committed to continuing to make these decisions, yet the kids know he shouldn't be. So how do you start those conversations? Those are hard conversations to have. Or how do you prepare in advance for what might happen? So those are the kinds of things that I'm working on. So a lot of it is not just identifying and saying, holy bleep, now what do we do? But trying to get ready for that holy bleep moment before it happens.
So if there is someone listening here, which predominantly will be leaders or future leaders, right? And they're going to either be dealing with this in their own life because they're going to have a nest egg, or like you mentioned, they're in an age where they're going to be having aging parents or family members. What
Yeah.
what should they do at this point? What's the next step for them?
Well, it's interesting. I'm gonna add one more piece to that. Is if you look at the statistics on caregiving and the statistics on the amount of time, especially a lot of more senior executives lose to caregiving, it's become, I don't want to overuse the word crisis, but some of the stats I've seen are very striking about who's leaving work for what reason. And a lot of times there's sort of two bubbles. A lot of times younger people are leaving work, usually because they're having kids and so taking time off to raise a family. But there's this other cohort of more senior executives in their 50s and 60s who either they themselves are getting sick, but even more likely they have a spouse or a parent who's getting sick, and a lot of them are having to quit or substantially scale back their time because of caregiving duties. So from a managerial perspective, especially if I were running a big company, I would be very concerned about this, and I would try to implement some very generous caregiving policies and time away, especially for those, so those older executive, they're the ones who have the knowledge, the experience, and, you lose a few of those folks and it can be, really major blow. So I would consider that, very strongly, how to protect and keep those employees who have these, extensive caregiving responsibilities. So that's why I just wanted to mention that because I think that's a related piece that I think
I
doesn't
agree.
maybe
I think
get
it's huge.
enough, doesn't get enough attention, but can have serious consequences for a lot of firms. And then just although just keeping in mind that especially for the older employees, they are going to have health issues, and I would want to make sure they have really good health insurance policies, and try to do everything I can to promote more exercise and more healthy behaviors. I mean, one thing you see more and more when you look at the especially when it becomes to cognitive decline, and sort of longevity in general. Most people think it, I mean, it's hard. It's everybody's different, but you know, uh, most people think it's some like 70% environmental and 30% or so genetics. So, I've had two very good friends die of ALS, and
Mhm.
they just had a genetic gun pointed to their head, virtually the day they're born, and obviously there's nothing they could do about that. Um, but on the other hand, there are a lot of things you can do, in terms of exercise, diet that are in your control that'll help you live longer and help and very importantly, help your brain function better. So I think that I wouldn't skimp at all when it comes to, promotions around employee health. I would, push that and, try to get, gym memberships or whatever it takes, do company outings. We're all going for a hike, or, give people Friday afternoons off or something like that, because there's just a very, very clear correlation between mental acuity and especially exercise and diet together. It's a, if there were a pill to give you the benefits of exercise, it would be the greatest medical discovery ever.
Wow. And I believe that. I mean, you read a lot about it. What, as far as cognitive decline, what's been the trend over the last 5, 10, 20, 30 years? Is it at an earlier age, a later age? Or we have longevity, it used to be 40, now it's 53. Like
Yeah,
what is the research?
I mean, people are definitely living longer, right? If you look at life expectancy, there's this caveat within the last few years in the United States, it's gone to COVID, and then these so-called deaths of despair. Um, and but if you look at especially trends in, there's also a wealth component to longevity. People who have more money live longer, which is not surprising. But especially if you look at that cohort, the wealthier cohort, their life expectancy continues to increase. Um, Cognitive decline, there's a little bit of evidence that things are getting a little better because people are like not smoking. The cessation of smoking has not only obviously had major impact on things like stroke and frequency of strokes and lung cancer, but they're also, we think there's a correlation between that and dementia as well. So I think there is greater awareness around the importance of exercise and the importance of diet, and I think that's helping. Um, because when you think about it from an evolutionary perspective, we didn't need a functioning brain at 65 because we were already dead. you know, Life expectancy was, between like 28 and 40 for most of our lives. And now, some people, but, back then you get bit by the wrong spider and you're dead, right? You have appendicitis, you're dead. You have, very, minor skin cancer that we could cure now, you're dead. Or you have a heart condition. So we didn't really evolved to the extent where we really got to needed our brain because we weren't alive. Um, but I do think, especially in the short term, I think things have gotten a little bit better. Um, I mean, there's kind of competing. As people get older, as you get older, you have more and more chance of getting dementia. So as you get older in general, as the population ages in general, you're going to have more people with dementia. But then there's a little bit of a countervailing force that's saying, no, people are taking better care of themselves. But but there's no cure anytime soon. There's a couple of drugs out there that help a little bit with, Alzheimer's, but it's hard to see anything in the next even 10 years that's really going to help substantially other. So just, what I always would say to the executives, and I'm sure they hear this all the time, go take a walk for lunch, get more exercise, jump in the swimming pool. And studies show you don't have to train for a marathon, you know, brisk walk for a half hour a day can make a big difference.
And we're not talking, I think the biggest key, kind of a takeaway for me from this conversation is it's not just the physical, like you started with, right? Heart attack and this, it's the mental decline, it's the cognitive, and how exercise and diet can have such an impact on that. And
Yeah.
that it's a huge risk. So, yeah.
It's a huge
Let me,
risk. I
I've,
mean, and if you look, I'll just
Go
say
ahead.
one more thing, and I've looked a lot of statistics. I mean, it's by the time someone's in their, early to mid 80s, they have a 50% chance of having dementia or mild cognitive impairment. So the numbers, especially by the time, by the mid 70s on, those numbers really start to go up.
Which I don't know the numbers on heart attack or other health issues, but 50% is pretty high.
It's pretty high.
And it seems like people don't, like you said early on in the discussion here, is I think some people, there's a stigma about cognitive decline and mental health. And, we talk about, like you said, prostate, or we talk about heart attack or cancer, but mental decline, cognitive decline it's a huge one. And I think it has to be taken serious for people and looked at it and identify it at an earlier age if they're able. So,
Yeah, and don't see it as a moral failing. Don't look at these people as crazy. They're sick.
yeah, and we do. I think people judge. So, all right, two more last questions here. Last
Yeah.
one is second to last one. The podcast is, inside the leader's mind. What's in the way becomes the way. Where do you feel you get in your own way as a leader?
Oh, a lot of, how much time do you have? So I tend to, for a lot of, I mean, both my parents are teachers. My father was a college professor. So I have this thing. It's like, oh, if you just show people the facts, they'll understand it. And of course they'll get it. And so I think that I still, as much as hope I've learned over the last, whatever, 30 years in business, that people don't make decisions based on the facts when they're presented. There's all these emotional considerations. Um, so I think that's part of it. I also, I could be much better at delegating. I tend to want to do things myself. It's like, I know how to do this. I'm just going to do it myself. And, there's only so fast you can grow with that. Only one person can do so much. So, and I'm a little stubborn sometimes, and probably should give up or change course a little sooner than I do. So those are just a few of the things.
Just a few. If we had another hour, oh my God. All right,
Yeah, if
last
we had another
question.
hour or
Thank you.
so.
Thank you for sharing that. Last question is what's the question you wish people would ask you, but they don't, but secretly you kind of wish they would ask you?
Um, I was thinking about this, and I think historically, and I think some person may have asked me this in a startup way, way long ago. I think he asked me, "What if you fail?" And as an entrepreneur, I was like, "I'm not going to fail." Right? Entrepreneurs, for the most part, are, they're always optimistic. They're always saying this is going to work. But, when you look at the statistics, 95, 90% of businesses fail. So, um, and I remember asking the question, it's like, what a stupid question. This is when I was 30 years old or something. Of course, we're not going to fail, and we failed spectacularly in this case. So I think that's, and there's still this question of, okay, if when do you give up? because I don't like to give up.
It's a tough
But
one.
maybe,
That's a tough
maybe
one.
it's sometimes I should have given up or should have given up on something. So the question is, what happens if you fail? What if this doesn't work out? When do you decide that it isn't working out? That's something that's very hard for me, again, because I'm stubborn and I'm optimistic. I'm always saying, "Oh, just keep going, keep persisting, and this is gonna work." But it's not always the case.
And that is so tough because you hear so many stories of entrepreneurs or anyone, performers, right? Actors, singers, that like they were that close to
Right,
quitting. And
right,
then they did one, it's like
right.
acres of diamonds, I think, it's like you just one more and you hit it. And it's true. It's so funny. People, I think, and I don't want to speak for everyone, but I'll speak for myself. When I first looked at a lot of businesses, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's an overnight success.
Yeah,
And then when you dig in, you go, no, they've been at it 10, 15, 20
right.
years and is
Yeah,
some, but we look at the Google and the Facebooks of the world that like, shot up,
right.
but those are the exceptions, right? Those are
Oh,
the
they're the
outliers.
one in a million almost, really, when you think of all the startups.
Oh my
It's
gosh, there's so
very,
many.
very, very unlikely. And we celebrate those victories as we should, but I think that can sometimes mask, the tremendous difficulties with starting a company and being successful and sustaining that success over a long period of time.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to learn, a lot to do, right? To be successful.
Yep. Yep. Keep
So,
keep
uh,
trying. Keep trying. Don't give up, until
no,
you
no,
really need to give up. But persistence
yeah, who
pays. I
knows
do
when
think
that is.
persistence pays. But you don't
But
know. So, but also don't, on the flip side, don't be too stubborn. Listen to other people who've gone through this. And if enough people are telling you to stop, then maybe you should stop.
that's tough. It's tough though.
It's
Anyway,
tough.
well, if someone wants to learn more about your business, your company, what you do, what is the best
Yeah.
way for them to learn more, etc.?
A couple things. You can find me on LinkedIn, Chris Heye, PhD. There's not a lot of Chris Heye. I think there's one other Chris Heye.
And that's
And we
H E
connect
Y
on
E is
LinkedIn.
the last name. Yep,
Heye. Yeah.
yep.
So I'm on LinkedIn. I have a newsletter that frequently covers a lot of these issues. If you want to check that out, or you want to connect with me or sign up with the for the newsletter. I also have a regular column in the Journal of Financial Planning where again I don't talk about so much the nuts and bolts of financial planning, but I talk about issues around health and longevity, and so where all those intersect. Um, and then you can find me at wealthchat.ai. It's wealth with an extra H. So it's health chat with a W in front of it. So wealthchat.ai. And you can take a look at some of my latest creations. These are AI powered chatbots. There's some chatbots both for financial professionals and for clients and consumers to help them effectively plan for the kinds of things we talked about. So that's another place to look. And yeah, welcome hearing from any of your listeners.
Love it, love it. And I'll make sure I put links in the show notes for
Great.
today. So, Chris, thank you so much for being with me. I appreciate you.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Absolutely. So, folks, if you've enjoyed it, subscribe, share, recommend some amazing leaders that you think I should be interviewing. But it's because of you that we do what we do here. So, thank you so much for being with me. This is Inside the Leader's Mind, and I'm David Susan. Until next time.